The Edmonton Oilers and St. Louis Blues are engaged in a stare down. We have 6 days to figure it all out.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues. I'm Nick Zararis, host of Locked On Oilers. That's Haley Simon, host of Locked On Blues. We want to thank everybody who makes our shows their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. So, Haley, how are we doing today?
Doing well. I can't complain over here in St. Louis. How are you doing today out in Edmonton?
I'm enjoying the gossip. I can't lie. Just hearing they wouldn't have done this if Ken Holland was still the general manager. And Ken Holland was told he should have signed these guys in January and chose not to do it. It's funny when these grown men gossip like it's high school.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get on into it. Give me the 10,000-foot view of the St. Louis Blues coming into this offseason after how last year goes, firing Craig Berube midseason, bringing in an interim coach, giving the interim coach a real runway to kind of figure it out. Give me an understanding of where the Blues are at.
The Blues are in desperation mode, and I'm not saying that this is a desperate team. I am saying one person in particular, and that is Doug Armstrong, our GM. The thing with the St. Louis Blues is this. It's very simple. We have missed the playoffs for 2 consecutive seasons. And with the moves they made this offseason, while they did add more depth piece players, but Foxa, you have a Ryan Suter that they added, you still needed to get some bigger names. So with these offer sheets, it really just goes to show, hey, we're willing to mess with another competitive Western team. And at the same time, we're able to potentially get 2 great players. So right now, I think the Blues are playing some cat and mouse chase, and I'm liking what they're doing.
As far as where the Blues are at roster-wise, they've got a few nice pieces. Mm-hmm. How would these guys, Broberg and Holloway, fit in along with kind of like what's the vision of the Blues? Where are they going? Where are they at right now? How would these 2 guys potentially fit in?
Yeah, so I mean, right off the bat, we have to talk about Broberg. He would be such a good second pair defenseman. So off the bat, that's where I would see him going. And then you have Holloway. And if we're able to get him as well, I could see him on the 3rd line. I wouldn't necessarily say 4th line, but I think that he could switch between the 3rd and the 2nd line. So the Blues definitely could utilize him in their lineup come opening night. So that's why this makes it even more exciting, because they do not have enough good players, especially on defense.
The Blues are in an interesting position because I hate to be this guy, but they won. They accomplished their goal. Armstrong, Berube, they accomplished their goal. They got their Stanley Cup. They've got maybe the most notable Stanley Cup of the last 15 years, pulling off the last to first. They have a real kind of. It's funny to watch how that plays out because you got similar situations playing out right now in Pittsburgh and Washington where they've already won. And now it's a matter of how long can we keep the good vibes going? And the Blues, reasonably competitive playoff team. They sank money into guys in free agency over the last handful of years. They've made some swings. They've tried to be aggressive, but they're also realistic, letting Pietrangelo go, trading Tarasenko, trading Ryan O'Reilly. It's a weird place to be because they're not bad enough where you could justify doing what the Sharks have done, but they're not good enough to really say, okay, let's get crazy and start pushing chips in. That's why this is such a good move for them.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the St. Louis Blues, you have to be realistic. They're the best, worst team in the National Hockey League. And I say that with a grain of salt. I am very proud with how they performed for maybe the middle part of the season this past year. But at the same time, there's some foundation pieces that they still need to get stronger in, especially their power play. So the Blues are in a point where you do have a lot of guys that were on that Stanley Cup team still with St. Louis. You have Jordan Binnington, you have Robert Thomas, Colton Parayko, Braden Shen, who's their captain. So the list can go on and on. But at the same time, you do have some of these younger players. And the Blues are also counting on their prospects like a DeBoer Dvorsky to make the team this season. So they are in a position right now where I say, you know what? Make those moves, become a strong team, because pretty soon those same players, especially, and I say this with pain in my heart, but Robert Thomas, who is my favorite player in the St. Louis Blues, You never know. I know his contract's not going to end for years on years, but maybe he would request a trade if the team isn't making it to the playoffs. It's one thing to win your Stanley Cup your rookie season. It's another to not ever kind of get back there again.
It's a complicated position for the Oilers. I said this on yesterday's show, and I'll repeat it now. It kind of seems like they went into this offseason with the mindset of, we got this, we're fine, very confident of, we'll spend money in free agency. We'll figure out the money stuff later in the summer. We got to replace our general manager. And here we are. It's the second week of August, and you still haven't figured out Evan Bouchard. You haven't figured out the Draisaitl extension. Now you have to figure out what you're going to do with Holloway and Broberg. And it, from an outside looking in perspective, how do you read the way the Oilers have handled their summer?
It's interesting. Definitely being over cap space isn't something that I would expect much of Edmonton. And the thing is with the Oilers, and this is where I have the most confusion about it, you have such star players. Realistically, how did Edmonton think they're going to retain all the talent that they have? It doesn't make sense to me as an outsider looking into your team, but I'm happy how it played out selfishly, but at the same time, I'm very confused on what they thought the plan was.
It's interesting because there's conflicting reporting going on right now, because the silver bullet for the Oilers offseason was supposedly, we're just going to LTIR Evander Kane. We're going to wait as long as we can to close as the start of the season as possible.
Following the Golden Knights.
Yes, they copy the Golden Knights, copy the Lightning, copy the Blackhawks. Yeah, that is what I assume the silver bullet strategy was. Evander Kane has been rehabbing. He didn't get surgery. He's been doing physical therapy, trying to get ready for the start of the season. And then yesterday on the Oilers podcast, the team podcast, Bob Stauffer very casually was like, yeah, we think Evander Kane's going to end up needing surgery after spending 3 months rehabbing his hip. So my assumption was the Oilers thought, okay, we'll get Bouchard in here for like $3.5-4 million. We'll get Broberg 1.6, 1.7, and we'll get Holloway 1.3, 1.2. And then the Blues threw a monkey wrench into the equation and said, well, if you're not going to sign them, and this was a real vulnerability, the Blues weren't the only team that could have or should have done this. There are a lot of teams that could use guys like this. And it makes a lot of sense for the Blues. And we're going to talk about this more in the next segment, but they kind of need more guys in that window, those guys in their early and mid 20s, because they have a lot of established talent, but it's on the older end of things. And you need to gradually cycle through guys. And that's a problem for the Oilers right now. Their youngest player they have under contract is Evan Bouchard, who's 24.
Yeah, that's not that young in hockey at least.
Yeah.
Listen, 25 myself. I'm not calling
we're not.
But I'm just saying in hockey, you definitely want to have those younger talents. That's why, again, 23 and 22 years old, potentially going away when they are, I don't understand how the Oilers, and that's what I can't comprehend. How do they not sign them? I don't understand that they waited this long. It doesn't make any sense. That's
after the Olympics. After the Olympics, I've officially accepted it's over for me at 27 years old. It's completely over. When there are children in the Olympics winning gold medals, it's over. It could not be more.
I did not feel good seeing the 14-year-olds. I'm like, okay, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah, you feel very unaccomplished. Yeah, you're fine. We're in the hockey world. We're not washed. 27, you get one more good contract at 27. So it's not entirely over for me yet.
Okay, if you say so.
One last good run. And then the one last thought I wanted to get in before we take a break and move on. As for where the Blues are at, these types of pieces, this is the type of calculated risk you really need to take. You had mentioned that specifically one person was getting kind of desperate here. This isn't even that risky. In all honesty, this is a lot better than like the free agents you could buy on the first day of free agency back in July.
Free agency this year was, respectfully, it was trash. It was just a lot of older, washed up players, and it was not good. But the reason why I say it's like, and it's not desperate in a bad way, but I feel like Doug Armstrong, especially, in 2 years, Alexander Steen's going to take over as GM for the St. Louis Blues. And as I mentioned, the past 2 consecutive seasons, the Blues have missed out on the playoffs, and there's been a lot of heat thrown at Doug Armstrong's way. So this is a way for him to kind of redeem himself and to show the city of St. Louis, to show our great hockey fans here that he is still a very capable GM and that he knows what he is doing for the better of the team.
It's really, really good, just frankly, to see a general manager doing the most they can. It's my biggest pet peeve when a general manager is like, well, it would have been really difficult to do. Like a few years ago when Chuck Fletcher couldn't find a way to move Ristolainen to be able to offer Johnny Gaudreau a contract in that free agency. It's crazy when a general manager says, well, it would have been hard, but that's your job. Everyone's job is hard. It drives me nuts. So it's good to see a general manager taking some risks and in a creative way too. That's the other gripe I always have is that general managers
love offer sheets. I think it's so fun. I mean, it's awful for the team that's not going to be able to pay up. But, I feel like it's the drama and theatrics of hockey in the summer, especially. And I feel like a lot of people, I had to educate people on what an offer sheet even was. And it's something that hasn't really been thrown around often lately. So between, all the Toronto Maple Leafs news with, Austin Matthews and now this week with the Blues and the Oilers, it is a very exciting week. And it's only Wednesday.
The Blues really crashed the Royal McWedding. The day the photos come out in Vogue Australia from McDavid's wedding, the day the offer sheets get announced. Just unnecessary drama. I still want to know who pitched the NHL on that no soap operas, just hockey marketing campaign. They could not have been more wrong.
It's so drama filled and I love it.
It's great. Hockey is a reality show. You just have to frame the way you think about it. We are going to take a quick break. Be right back. We'll talk a little bit more about how this is going to impact each team's rosters right after this. It is summer. That means barbecues, baseball, beach, concerts. And if you want to get out there this summer, get to a game, get to a concert before summer's over. The only place I get tickets from is from our friends over at Gametime. I will be there to watch the Mets play a 1:00 game against the Oakland A's tomorrow. And I got my tickets for my friends and I from Gametime. Gametime with some of the best features in the ticket buying business. Things like zone deals where you choose a section and let Gametime choose the seats. All in pricing where they show you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout once you turn the feature on. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You want to see balls and strikes at a baseball game. You want an idea what your view looks like. The lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. And Gametime ticket coverage, where your purchase is covered with the most flexible ticket policy in the business. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. Thank you for making Locked On Oilers or Locked On Blues your first listen of the day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with the national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Haley, let's talk about this from a Blues roster perspective, because I have them up right now on my notes, and I look at Robert Thomas, Jordan Kyrou, rock solid. Jake Neighbors has been floating around the periphery for a little while, somebody that they've talked up a lot, but not really solidified what he is yet. Their second line is solid. It's just kind of old. Like, I still think Brandon Saad is reasonably effective. Buchnevich, always loved his game. Braden Shen, as you mentioned, still an effective hockey player. Once you get past that, it's a lot of question marks. In your mind, who would Dylan Holloway ideally play with from a Blues side of things?
Well, the third line is a little shaky right now. So we did have Kevin Hayes as our center, obviously. We traded him to Pittsburgh. And thank you, by the way, Pittsburgh, for swapping draft picks with us to make the offer sheets happen. But definitely he would play in the third line. Now, the third line is a little bit of a confusing situation, as I did mention. I could see a lot of potential outcomes with it. Maybe one of the Joseph brothers. Here's the thing. I think Oscar Sundqvist will be okay to play, but he's a fourth liner guy. But at the same time, it's one of those situations where there's so many names and variables that I can switch around and throw around. But you really have to, take it as a grain of salt. I mean, if Dvorsky ends up playing, then Jordan Kyrou is going to be bumped down probably to the second line. So then you're going to have to bump down maybe like Assad. Like there's just all these different variables. So unlike the Oilers where your team is a little bit more solidified, right now we're in a situation of, oh, well, we don't know what our roster is going to look like at all. So ideally, it's a good question that you had. Maybe Texier, like there's so many possibilities, but Dvorsky, I mean, if you put him on the third, I mean, again, I'm talking out loud here. You threw a curveball at me just because of how awful everything is right now.
It's not awful. It's just a lot of unknown. That's the thing. It's unknown.
Makes it awful. I want to know. We're August 14th. You know, we have training camp soon, and there's so many unknowns right now. So I am still certain, though, that third line is where Holloway will end up.
It's interesting because we've been talking about this from a Blues perspective. The Oilers, if they find a way to make one of them work, it's probably more likely to be Holloway because the money's a little more palatable. The Oilers don't really have a spot for him either because they went and bought in Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner because in a vacuum, I like the Skinner and Arvidsson additions, but in an ideal world, or in a more well thought out world, I should say, you would have had Dylan Holloway in one of those two spots, in the Arvidsson or Skinner spot, which has kind of left him where he's going to probably, if the Oilers find a way to keep him, he's going to play on the third line with Adam Henrique, and then whichever forward isn't playing in the top six, that might be Evander Kane, that could be Jeff Skinner, that could be Victor Arvidsson, that could be Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. There are a lot of permutations of the way the Oilers could just play their lineup.
For you guys, great players that make it difficult.
Yes and no. Yes, in that it's probably going to be okay that they can absorb the loss of a Broberg or a Holloway. It's going to make things a lot dicier. We were talking about it from a cap position in the first segment, but there's a world where the Oilers might go into opening night next year with 19 guys and they just cannot roster more than 19 guys in a given night, kind of like what Vegas had to do when they first traded for Jack Eichel, where there were nights they only dressed 16, 17 skaters to be cap compliant. And the Oilers, they're old. Like I said before, Evan Bouchard's the youngest player in this lineup, but you're really banking on guys like Corey Perry and Adam Henrique. If you're banking on those guys staying healthy, playing 70, 80 games, it's probably an uphill battle.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, easily with Broberg, I know exactly where he would be without a doubt. So that's why I'm kind of hoping that he's the one that we get here in St. Louis, because he would be definitely paired with my boy Jay Folk. No doubt about it.
Does it give you apprehension that both of these guys don't have a lot of NHL experience, that they're 22, 23, 24 years old? They both have less than 100 career games.
No.
Broberg, no, not at all? Not even a little hesitation?
Broberg has 81 games, and Holloway has 87 or 89 or something. No, that doesn't bother me because they have playoff experience in the National Hockey League, and that is more valuable than anything right now. The St. Louis Blues, they have a set of really strong veterans, and I know the Oilers do too, but I'm not focused on you guys. I am focused here on the Blues, and I feel like having players not only who played regular season hockey games, which is huge because a lot of our guys have just played in the AHL, who have had that playoff experience, it adds value. And again, they were both drafted in the first round with their respective draft classes. In 2019, I want to say that was Broberg, and then in 2020 for Holloway. So both of the guys obviously have a lot of value. And again, as I mentioned, if Broberg is paired up with Justin Folk, he is such a good veteran, especially somebody that's able to teach him a lot. So that would make me feel happy. Obviously, when I think about the third, line, potentially playing with Foxa or, Texier is young, but especially Foxa, who's had a lot of experience, that again gives me excitement about Holloway. So I think that the Blues do have a lot to offer these players. I think it's more of they played in the playoffs. They obviously made it to the finals. It wasn't the result that you guys wanted, but it definitely makes me feel good.
All right, we are going to take one more quick break, and then we're going to give you our best guesses as to what actually happens over the course of the next 6 days. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style. eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Thank you to everybody who is hanging out on this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues. Okay, I'm just going to come out and ask, and we can go off of that point.
Okay,
what do you think is going to happen?
Realistically, I think that the Oilers are actually going to retain one of the players and match one of the Blues' offer sheets, and that is going to be Holloway. I think the Blues are going to get Broberg. Happy about that, obviously, but I think that the Oilers are going to probably within the next couple of days. I don't see it taking the whole 6 rest of the days. So that's my thought.
I am inclined to agree with you for 2 reasons. Number one, I think it's a lot easier to make the Holloway money work under the salary cap. Like either way, with Evander Kane, don't know whether or not they're going to find a way to LTIR him, because I'm going to talk about this on the show I'm going to do tomorrow for Locked On Oilers.
Stone can get LTIR'd, and we all know how that looked. I'm sure they can do it with Kane.
Mark Stone's been LTIR'd 3 years in a row between the trade deadline and the start of the playoffs.
It's going to definitely happen. It's easy to do now in the National Hockey League, which is a whole other annoyance that I have.
The thing is, and the reason it's never going away is the other general managers know they're going to do the same exact thing if given the opportunity. And that's why it's not going away. And like, I understand both sides of it. It's the same exact thing with fighting. Like there are arguments to get rid of it, but at the same time, the people who are in control like having it. So it's going to stay. That's really what it comes down to. I think LTIR manipulation, if your team is smart enough to do it, you should. The Lightning had a team priced at like $100 million the second time they won the salary cap, and the cap ceiling was like 81.5. I wish my team did that.
Yeah, well, they didn't, so.
Yeah, that's the thing.
I jacked the whole episode.
Oh, it's fine. This is naturally adversarial. You get one offer sheet every 5 years. You know, the last one was Coates Kiemi. Before that, it was Aho, and then before that, I want to say it might have been the Shea Weber one that the Flyers did, and then I think it was that, and then the Predators matched it anyway and ended up having to trade him anyway. The reason the Oilers won't match on Broberg, they would have too much money tied up on the left side of their defense.
It's a ridiculous amount of money, too, by the way.
Oh, it is. That's the reason I brought up. Yeah, that's the reason I brought up the amount of experience. You know, like Broberg's qualifying offer was like $925, whatever it is for a first round pick.
To me, do you think the amount of experience, generates the amount of money? I would say no, but if just a general thing, yeah, it's fine.
That's the thing, because that's kind of how it gets calculated. That's how you go and say, all right, I think we're worth this much. Yeah. He doesn't have a lot to stand on. There was early in the offseason, there was an expectation the Oilers might just give him his qualifying offer and say tough luck, because he doesn't have arbitration rights, and these don't happen. Offer sheets are so infrequent. The Oilers told 2 first-round picks in the last 4 years, we'll take care of you when we can, and waited an entire summer. That is how infrequent this is.
Well, it happened. So now there's only one way to find out, and that is in 6 days. So you really think that they're going to try to maintain and match Holloway?
Yes. I think he's more doable.
Yeah.
Broberg is more important, like infinitely more important. Yeah. The Oilers were talking about him as like, he's going to play on his offside with Darnell Nurse, with the mindset of, this guy with 80 some odd games of NHL experience is going to be good enough playing on his offside with our second worst defenseman that he's going to be okay. That's how highly they feel about him. That Nurse, who was probably their worst defenseman in the playoffs, is getting a babysitter 7 years younger than him and being told he's going to look out for you.
Is there a panic in Oil Nation right now about what's going on? Okay.
Yes, there definitely is worry.
I was on Edmonton radio yesterday, actually, and, I was kind of joking around a little bit, and like they were really upset. And I'm like, okay, you guys are still a good team. But at the same time, you have to remember that this is the former general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks, who we in St. Louis hate. Yeah. So I think that, while the Blues and Oilers don't necessarily have this, I guess we are rivals in a way now because of all this. So I guess I kind of solidified it. But there's more to the story is what I'm trying to say. And that's why you got to sign and take care of your players.
Everybody was having a great summer. The first 3 weeks of July.
Are you having a great summer, though, after losing the cup?
The Oilers responded to losing the cup with the best way they possibly could.
Yeah.
They signed Skinner. They signed Arvidsson. Great. Everybody's ecstatic. The guy who's filling in as the interim general manager is doing a great job. We got to figure out Draisaitl. We got to figure out Bouchard. We got to figure out Broberg and Holloway. But so far, a great start. And then you bring in Stan Bowman, and then this. You still don't have any clarity on the Draisaitl contract. It is very antsy. I wouldn't say panicked, but people are definitely a little bit anxious to see what happens here because the Oilers are staking a lot on we're going into next year. So without Broberg, the Oilers defense is going to be Ekholm, Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, Cody Ceci, Brett Kulak, and then one of Troy Stetcher, Joshua Brown, or a defenseman who has no NHL experience. And the Oilers defense was what lost them the cup final against Florida. To take Broberg away from that, it's making the defense worse.
That's an awful situation to be in. We don't have Torrey Krug. It's
first world problems. Yes, the Oilers will be a playoff team, but their ceiling is going to be capped by their defense.
And defense is what wins you games in this, time in the NHL, life that we're living in. It used to be really offensive. Now it's defense. And that's what we saw with the Florida Panthers is that their defense was just a lot stronger. So you're making me feel bad for you guys. And I'm not trying to feel bad for you guys.
I make a reasonable case.
You did. But
we're trying to win a Stanley Cup so Connor McDavid doesn't go down as the best player to never win a championship.
It's so tragic, too, when you think about it. When you think about all the great hockey players that we have in the NHL right now that have yet to win a Stanley Cup. And then you have guys like Nick Kubel who won a cup. That's not Nick Kubel.
Hey, man, Michael Del Zotto. These people who just hang around as the seventh defenseman, the 13th.
Michael Del Zotto.
Michael Del Zotto put together a solid NHL career. He played for 12 different teams.
That's what I'm saying. He was Mr. NHL.
Yeah. And some people love it, man. James Neal's riding the bus in the A. Some people just love it. Some people will just never walk away, regardless of how their results are going.
It's so funny.
It's weird when you think about it. James Neal's got $50-60 million in career earnings. Why are you riding the bus in the AHL?
Right?
Go coach hockey somewhere. Go.
Sometimes it's hard to hang up the skates, though. You know?
Yeah, it really is, and that's what's weird about it when you think about it from that perspective. But that will just about do it for this crossover edition of Locked On Oilers and Locked On Blues. So thank you for making the show your first listen of the day. Now go check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.